The importance of opposite gender friends. One of the greatest impediments to healing and growth and cultivating healthy reciprocal love is that many men and women remain profoundly disconnected from one another. I'm completing another chapter this week. There's so much depth and detail, so I will once again be reading from the article itself. I'm Ben Ufana. Let's dive in. So often, when we see someone we're attracted to, we move quickly into romance. We swipe right on their profile or approach them, express interest, go on dates, start spending time together, and a relationship begins to develop. That can lead to physical intimacy, deeper emotional attachment, and in some cases, long-term commitment, living together, marriage, and even children. Some of these relationships do work out over time. Most do not. There's often a strong sense of magnetism, a kind of biochemical pull. Dopamine, oxytocin, attraction, and physical intimacy create a powerful experience that can cloud our judgment. In many ways, we're operating under the influence. Our vision becomes distorted. We're not seeing clearly, and that's why there's so much we don't see about the person we've formed an attachment to. What often happens is that we eventually realize we're not all that compatible. We don't share the same values, interests, or ways of relating. In many instances, we find ourselves drawn to individuals who mirror and reenact the dysfunction and emotional wounding we experienced in our family of origin or in previous relationships. Shortly after moving to New York City, I started seeing a woman from Syria, but she broke it off because I wouldn't convert to Islam. I grieved the loss for months afterwards, but as I came out the other side, I thought to myself, I really do want to be in a committed long-term relationship. So I resolved to engage with at least 2 women a day until that happened. Over the span of a few years, I spoke with thousands of women that I encountered mostly in New York City and Boston, in supermarkets, while commuting, on the subways, in buses, classes, workshops, concerts, museums, or wherever I found myself. Initially, I was painfully shy, and on a few occasions, women reacted rather harshly, yet over time, as I became more and more comfortable and fluid in my interactions, women often began opening up to me and engaging in lengthy, animated conversations. New York City is fast-paced and transient, with a lot of brief and often superficial interactions. At the same time, women in New York City and Boston could be considerably more guarded and mistrusting, especially compared to other parts of the country, like what I found when I lived in the Midwest, in Kansas City, in Southwest, New Mexico, but anyway, there were many instances where I would start talking with the woman and it felt like we were really connecting, as though I had made a new friend. And afterwards, I would send an email, text, or call, and then no response. Or maybe we would exchange a few messages, then it would drop off. And more often than not, I would never see or hear from them again. Of the relatively small number of women I actually connected with and spent time with, especially in New York City, a substantial portion faded out or disappeared altogether. Well, I can be playful and flirtatious at times. I often made a concerted effort not to show too much interest. I much prefer showing up in a way that felt open, friendly, and engaging, and allowing any connection that formed to evolve organically. And because I also struggled with abandonment issues, there was a part of me that feared potential loss. In many instances, I didn't even know whether I necessarily wanted anything romantic. I also didn't want to rush into romance because there have been times in the past when I did and later regretted it. Yet, I remained open. I genuinely enjoyed meeting and getting to know these women, and I would have been perfectly content even if the connection remained purely platonic. Later on, I came to realize that this wasn't only my experience. Other men I spoke with often described very similar patterns, and some of the women I worked with and became friends with shared similar experiences involving dating and relationships in New York City. They too often encountered people pulling away, failing to follow through, gradually fading out, or simply disappearing altogether. Although I've known people who partnered up in New York City, there's definitely something about the culture and pace of the city itself that can make genuine connection much harder to sustain. The difficulty of forming meaningful connections, or feeling as though I was beginning to connect with someone only to then be ghosted, was not only disappointing, it was incredibly painful. I had all these spontaneous encounters, yet despite my best efforts, nothing came of them. Over time, I began to assume I just wasn't the kind of man that women are attracted to. Fortunately, I've had lots of opportunities to travel. During that time, I went to Ohio for several months to do an internship with the hypnotist. Training I was doing is part of my continuing education at that time. Within the first week of being there, I was seeing a woman. It just happened, or actually, she sought me out. Later, when I started traveling back and forth to Sri Lanka, the women I encountered would often make eye contact, smile, even engage me in conversation. After exchanging a few messages or calls, they would often invite me over to their homes to meet with their families. Meaningful connections in Sri Lanka came much more easily, and despite the ethnic tensions that led to a war that lasted nearly 30 years, Sri Lankans tend to be more open and engaging, and I found it much easier to connect, which also had a lot to do with there being a lot greater resonance. Over the years, I've been in relationships with 2 women that I've connected with during the times that I've been in Sri Lanka. It was in my mid-20s that the traumas of my own childhood and adolescence began to resurface. During that time, some of the women I found myself forming attachments to and becoming involved with were themselves deeply wounded. In some cases, there were narcissistic or borderline tendencies, or even issues with alcohol and other substances. Yet, in the vast majority of cases, they simply were just not a good match. In either case, they were reflecting back to me my own emotional wounding and disconnection from myself. Yet, at that time, I didn't really understand what was happening. I wasn't aware of how my own wounds were influencing who I was drawn to or how I was relating. I just knew I felt strongly, and I kept finding myself entangled in relational dynamics that were confusing, painful, and it often left me at a complete loss. Engaging with so many women helped me to grow as an individual. It provided me with many valuable opportunities to develop my own communication skills, gain a much better understanding of women, and become a better friend and companion. It helped me to understand the differences among women more clearly, and I became much more aware of their emotional wounding, as well as their strengths and other positive qualities. Over time, I learned to recognize when a woman I was interacting with had borderline or narcissistic tendencies, was dishonest, manipulative, game-playing, or struggled with alcohol or other substances. I no longer took these behaviors personally or automatically assumed that they were about me. Another thing that happened was that as I kept working through so many layers of emotional numbing, becoming more present in my body and becoming increasingly empathic, it became much more apparent when there was a lack of resonance. I became far more aware of when I genuinely connected with someone and when I did not. In addition, I became much clearer about what I truly desire in a companion. And I began to recognize when a woman I was connecting with was kind, caring, compassionate, emotionally available, intelligent, and capable, someone I genuinely resonated with and felt deeply connected to, someone who was authentic and capable of depth. Going back to my time in college, at least half, if not more, of my friends were women. When I lived in Kansas City in my late 20s, I didn't have any close male friends, but I formed friendships with a number of women. And I would stop by the homes of two stay-at-home mom friends during the day while they were caring for their small children. I met with other women friends for lunch or to go for walks. And some nights I would stay over rather than driving all the way back I was living out in the suburbs at the time, but I would stay over at their place. While I do have male friends I truly value, who tend to be more intelligent, intuitive, and forging their own unique paths in life, I realize that in most instances I find it more enjoyable and generally prefer spending time with women. I often find there is more common ground and that it is much easier for me to relate. Many of the things men often bond over, I simply cannot relate to and have little interest in. Now, if a man is well-traveled and interested in different cultures, geopolitics, psychology, human potential, lineage-based spirituality, and other deeper dimensions of life, well, that's a whole different story. There have been periods of my life when I wasn't in a relationship. Yet, I found that spending time with women friends helped bring a greater sense of balance into my life and met many of my needs for companionship and connection. Yet, I've also noticed a tendency among many men to have few, if any, meaningful friendships with women. They spend nearly all of their time with other men. And I've seen the same pattern among many women who spend most of their time exclusively with other women. We learn through relationship, through exposure, and through understanding people who experience and move through the world differently than we do. When we remain confined primarily to same-gender social circles, we tend to operate with huge blind spots, rigid assumptions, and distorted ideas about one another. As a result, many enter intimate relationships with unrealistic expectations and misunderstandings rather than genuine understanding. By limiting our engagement primarily to our own cultural group and gender, we're often unintentionally stunting our growth. We learn so much simply through engaging with people of different genders, cultures, backgrounds, and lived experiences. These interactions broaden us. They challenge our assumptions, expose our blind spots, and expand our understanding of ourselves and others. If you're a man, developing meaningful friendships with women can help you better understand and relate to them. And the same holds true for women in relation to men. Over time, these friendships give us a much clearer sense of the many ways people think, feel, communicate, and experience the world differently. And as our understanding deepens, we're often far less likely to repeat many of the same mistakes that so many men and women repeatedly make within intimate relationships. So many people today rely almost exclusively on dating apps or brief encounters with strangers, yet throughout much of human history, people often met and formed relationships much more organically through existing friendships, communities, and social circles. Meaningful friendships with the opposite gender often naturally expand our social world. People tend to know others who share similar values, interests, and ways of moving through life. Over time, these friendships can lead to introductions and connections that might otherwise have never happened. When our social world broadens naturally through friendship and meaningful connection, it provides us with far more opportunities to meet people who are truly compatible. And when people already know and trust you, they often have a much clearer sense of who you are and who you might genuinely resonate with. If you're heterosexual and struggling with dating or relationships, friends of the opposite sex can often provide invaluable perspective. Someone who genuinely knows and cares about you can sometimes see things you cannot. Over the years, I found that many women friends offered me insights into how women think, feel, and perceive men and relationships in ways I might never have understood on my own. They often could recognize my own blind spots, misunderstandings, or patterns in the ways I was relating that I simply could not see at the time. Because these women genuinely cared about me as a friend, they often helped me to make sense of the mixed signals and other ambiguities I encountered. At times, they warned me when they felt a woman was being manipulative or hurtful, or encouraged me to let go when a relationship was clearly unhealthy, and helped me to see things I could not yet recognize on my own. Rather than relying solely upon our own assumptions or the opinions of our same gender friends, meaningful friendships with the opposite sex can provide a perspective that helps us navigate dating and relationships with far greater understanding and maturity. Meaningful cross-gender friendships can play an important role in helping us become better companions and partners. Through these friendships, we gain a much deeper appreciation for the ways in which people think, feel, communicate, and move through the world differently. Without having these valuable cross-gender connections, many people move into intimate relationships operating with faulty assumptions, blind spots, and unrealistic expectations. They often carry biased or distorted perceptions of the opposite gender while having had surprisingly little meaningful engagement with them outside of romantic involvement. The meaningful bonds we form teach us many of the very qualities that healthy relationships require: empathy, patience, listening, communication, understanding, and the ability to appreciate another person's perspective rather than viewing everything exclusively through our own lens. So many of us have been hurt, rejected, misunderstood, betrayed, or left carrying painful impressions from previous relationships and experiences. Meaningful cross-gender friendships can help facilitate the healing of many of the relational wounds we carry. Over time, cross-gender friendships can provide a different kind of experience. They can help us feel seen, understood, valued, appreciated, and accepted. And through repeated positive interactions, many of the fears, assumptions, and emotional defenses we carry can gradually begin to soften. Many people mistakenly assume that healing these wounds can only happen within romantic relationships. Yet, friendship and companionship can, in many instances, become part of the healing process itself. Of course, navigating friendship and attraction isn't always straightforward. In the vast majority of instances, feelings remain purely platonic. Yet, there were times when I felt romantic interest and had to accept that a woman only wanted friendship. Sometimes it went the other direction. A woman developed stronger feelings for me and wanted something more while I only wanted friendship. And in some instances, when it became clear I wasn't interested romantically, the woman I had been spending time with gradually pulled away or cut me off completely. Human relationships are often fluid and not easy to neatly categorize. There were also instances in which friendships that began as purely platonic gradually shifted and took on a different quality. And there were other instances in which relationships that initially began as intimate gradually transitioned into platonic friendship. In closing, I want to encourage you to keep yourself open. It's through relationship that we grow, evolve, and come to understand ourselves and others more deeply. Meaningful cross-gender friendships provide us with an incredibly valuable opportunity, one we can easily miss when we remain cloistered within our same gender social circles. Be willing to risk vulnerability. Show up, pay attention, and participate. Some of the most meaningful lessons, healing, and transformations often emerge through the relationships and connections we least expect.